there is a story life and then there's a real life. And that we're inside of a story and we don't know it. And we don't know that we don't know it. And we're subject to that story. And how life shows up for us is seen through that story. The story, it's evolving. Let's say the story, it's active. It's not like fixed per se, but inside of your own story, you may be fixed. A part of your story may be, well, I can't change. It's too late. I'm resigned to this is just how I am. This is how life is. It sucks. I'm depressed. None of it's going to, that may be part of the storyline. But this is what I want to say here. Consider that there is a story life and then there's a real life. And that we're inside of a story and we don't know it. And we don't know that we don't know it. And we're subject to that story. And how life shows up for us is seen through that story. And it gives us what to think. It gives us what to see, what to do, what to say, where to go, where not to go, what not to say, what not to do. There's no freedom in the story. Not really. But it's not real. But people, this is my experience in working with people over a lot of years and around what we're talking about here, and is that people do not want to give up their stories. They will fight for their stories, even when, and especially when their stories are completely self-defeating, self-diminishing. When your stories are costing you actually everything you actually really want in life. They're costing you the deeper, bigger connection to your creator, your source, your creative power, your original thought and vision for life. And it's costing your vitality, but people won't give it up. They'll fight for their stories. And it took me a lot of years to realize why. I was very aware and present to, well, people are going to fight and argue for defend their stories. But I also knew I would stand for people waking up, because what was on the other side of that story was freedom. What was on the other side of the story was real power and love and generosity of being and the innocence, the original self. And your true calling is on the other side of that story. So I would be in the trenches with people, willing to fight the good fight, to have people even resisting seeing their story, knowing they're defending it. And to me, it was like, okay, this is typical, ordinary, usual. Everyone's going to be defending their story out of the gates. Fine. And though I was committed to people having experience of, well, what's on the other side of the story? Because you can keep your story. I'd always say, look, that's there for you. You can always go back inside of it, but you know not what's on the other side of it. Why not just explore that and then choose? And I'll tell you, people would tip it once they got to the other side of the story, like, oh my gosh, thank you. Thank God. Like, I'm burying that story. Now I can author a new one. But from free choice. Here's my point. It took me a long time to realize why people fight for their stories. And this is what I got to, was that people fight for their stories because their stories tell them who they are. When they give up the story or lose the story, even just leaving or letting the story go is a threat. And the threat there is like, well, who am I without my story? I wouldn't know who I am. My story is made up of all my past and every decision I've ever made, every judgment, everything is like the story. It tells me who I am. And without that, well, I'm nobody or I'm nothing. That's very scary. I won't know who I am. But it brings us to that existential question of like, well, who am I? It takes some humility and maybe courage even to just really stand in not knowing who you are, but being in the inquiry of that. Like, who are you actually? Like, really?